Hello, Brick Sculptors, and welcome back to Brick Sculpt. This is Chris, and today I want to talk about the most difficult shape to build in Lego. Now, when I say that, I'm sure most people jump right to the sphere. And, I think that's for good reason. To build a sphere at one time was considered very difficult in Lego, but it's been pretty well accepted that this is part of the application process to become a master builder, and because of that, tons of people are building spheres. You can find directions. I googled directions for this and I had this built in 10 minutes, so it's pretty simple to find all kinds of different designs to make all kinds of different Lego spheres, and so I'm going to rule that one out, although they are a lot of fun to make, and I highly recommend trying it if you've never done it before. I'm talking about something that I believe to be a little more complicated than that. And that is the obelisk. Now, the obelisk is quite tricky because of one thing. It's a very slow, gradual taper. And if there's one thing Lego doesn't like to do, it's very minute tapers. It likes big angles and stair-step things. It doesn't like very slight changes like that. This cap is pretty easy to build. This tower portion, pretty easy to build, but that taper, that's tricky. So, obelisks have been done in Lego before. In fact, there's several Lego sets that have included obelisks, like some of the older Lego Egypt Adventures sets, but they've never done a good job. And I've also scoured the internet looking for people who've made really realistic obelisks. I didn't find much. Maybe you've seen something I haven't, but this seems kind of like uncharted territory. Lots of people out there have tried to make Washington Memorials. Washington Memorial is the largest obelisk in the world, and so it's a pretty common one to try to build, but I haven't seen one that actually looks really good, no offense to anybody, and that's because this shape is incredibly difficult. So let's go ahead and take a look at some different possibilities for our obelisk. We'll start with the most simple one, just a tower. Now the cap is really easy to build, except for one thing. This piece here. If you're trying to build an obelisk in white, I couldn't believe this top pyramid piece. It is available in white, but it's incredibly rare. I've owned many of these pieces, apparently never a white one. It really didn't appear in hardly any sets, and on Bricklink or Brickowl, I could only find like a couple, and they were all in Europe, and they were all used and old and yellowed. So that's challenging right there. Other than that, though, the shape is very simple. I've just got some of these tapered pieces here, stacking up, and that pyramid on top. We can put that on top of here, and that's about the weakest looking obelisk you've ever seen. No taper at all, it's just straight, and yeah, that doesn't really cut it for me. So then we go, okay, well, we need a taper on it. So what's next? There's a taper. Well, that looks terrible. Now, I've seen models with this method that are really large, and it looks a little bit better, but this is a stair step. That's not a taper. Unless this thing was the size of the actual Washington Monument, this would be way too large of an increment to where you're going to see that like crazy, even in a large model. So I don't consider this acceptable. My next thought was, let's try to use some angled plates. And these were the ones that I found with the most angle. It's 6 high for every one that it goes out, and even this, the angle is way too sloped. I mean, look at that. And even if you could figure out how to make this work and get these joined right, even if that worked, it's going to be covered in studs. Good luck covering this in tile to make it nice and smooth and good looking like an obelisk should be. So I was at a loss. Now, I racked my brain around this for several months and trying to figure out the best way to do this. And I came up with a system that I think is pretty darn good. And it's inspired by this. Remember that toy that every baby gets, where you have the rings, and you stack them up, and they slowly get smaller, and they're all different colors. It's like, well, that could kind of form a pyramid type shape that tapers. And let's say we take that central core and we replace it with a square one. Well, now when we put our rings on, they'll perfectly align and they won't rotate. All right, we're getting even a little better. Now, obviously this taper is still too much. This is still 1 brick wide. But what if we get real creative with it? And what if we do some crazy snot magic and use brackets here? And here you can see we could really make the outside diameter of this whatever we want, as long as it's within a plate thickness or even a half plate thickness, depending on the technique you use. You can vary the outside quite a bit. And as long as you have the same central gap, in this case 2 by 2, even if it's irrational how it lines up with it, like you can see this doesn't quite line up perfectly, you have these weird gaps here, as long as you have those, you can stack these. And so, for example, this one here is 6 studs and then 2 plates. So you could make your taper really gradual. The next layer would be 6 studs, 1 plate. The next layer would be 6 studs. The layer after this would be 7 studs, and then 7 studs, 1 plate. And you could do this stair-step method, but really gradually. So that's what I've been working on. And let me show you how it's come out so far. And so this is what I've come up with. It's a nice subtle taper going up. Each layer gains 1 plate thickness over the last. And the base here, the width of this is 8 studs and 2 plates. The top layer here, the width of this is 6 studs. So in this height here, it tapers 2 studs and 2 plates, which 2 studs is 5 plates, so that's 7 plates in thickness from the bottom to the top. Now, proportion-wise, if this were the Washington Monument, this would be very stubby. Now, I made this as a model to test the concept. The actual Washington Monument has a ratio of 1 to 10, meaning the height is 10 times taller than the base is wide. I looked up obelisks on the internet, and I figured because they're associated with ancient Egypt and the founding fathers and the New World Order and all kinds of crazy stuff, that there would be some super exact dimensions. And there really isn't. It's just a general name for that shape. They range in dimensions a lot. They say that the ratio of an obelisk can be anything from 1 to 6 for a stubby, short obelisk, all the way up to 1 to 12, just depending on how it was designed and what it was supposed to look like. Now, this is a prototype here, so the tiles are kind of a mess. They kind of go all over the place. If I were going to actually make a model of this and try to make maybe a Washington Monument, I would make this much more refined on the surface. Also, a Washington Monument, if the base were the same width as this, would be almost twice as tall as the model you're seeing in front of you now. So what that means is this outer slope would be even more gradual. The stair step would be less obvious because each layer would be about twice as wide before it would have another stair step. So I think it'd look pretty cool, and I might make that someday if I decide to invest that much in white plates and tiles and brackets. But I'm going to quickly show you through some of the layers here. And let me tell you, this was a serious exercise in snot technique. If anyone wants to get better at snot technique, try this, because it will rack your brain. This took a lot of time, and I have to say, this is probably one of, if not the hardest thing I've ever built. It doesn't look that difficult, but well, let me show you what's inside, and you'll start to see why. Now, the inside of this is not super beautiful. There's a lot going on in there. So here's your first layer, and The most difficult layers are the ones where you have a whole number. This is 6 studs across, because then you have to fill in here with something that's really not plate. So this is actually bricks used in a snot fashion. And these just kind of connect from the outside, like this, and push together. So that's the first layer. Moving on to the second layer. Now the central core is not always 2 by 2. Sometimes it's attached like it is in this one if you have to do bricks. Sometimes it's a 4 by 4. Just whatever fits best with that method for that layer. So that layer is a 4 by 4. The next one is a 2 by 2. The next layer is absolutely crazy and probably the most difficult in the entire thing. This one is 7 plates across. And why it's so difficult is in order to do 7 plates across, you have to put a bracket in here if you want this side to also be 7 plates. Because I have it filled in the middle with 6 plates, and I have 1 plate and 1 plate, so that means I need a half plate. And the bracket makes for a perfect half plate there, but then the design gets really nuts. But I made it work. This is attached to the center on this layer. Kind of has to be. This one's nuts. Oh, don't fall apart on me. This is quite difficult to disassemble. Here we go. The next layer is based around a 5 by 5 central core. Kind of interesting. After that, we have a 3 by 3 central core in this one. This one is attached because this one has a whole number. We have 8 on the outside, means we use bricks on the side. And this one filled out really nicely just with bricks and a couple brackets there to hold it. And pretty cool technique there. The next one, also a 2 by 2 core. And the last one, a 4 by 4 core. And I apologize for all the ugly colors. Again, this is just a concept. I was grabbing random bricks that I'm not going to really need for anything else. Just whatever I had a lot of. And also that's why these are kind of these ugly yellowed white, which actually is pretty accurate for the Washington Monument because it is kind of a weathered white look. But anyway, but you can see each individual layer had to be crafted specifically to fit on a specific core to go with it. So this is going to be 8 studs, 2 plates. On top of that, 8 studs, 1 plate. On top of that, 8 studs. On top of that, 7 studs, 2 plates. 7 studs, 1 plate. 7 studs. 6 studs, 2 plates. 6 studs, 1 plate. 6 studs. And then our cap. So let me know below what you think. Does this look like a good concept for how to do this? Or can you think of a better way? Well, that's all I got for this time. I hope you guys liked this video. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe, because I'm going to do more just like this in the future. And we will see you next time.